You feel nostalgic for something you can't remember living. It's a longing that feels real, even without a past. And no one teaches how to grieve something that never actually happened. By the end of this reflection, this longing may feel less strange, not resolved, just more honestly placed. There is a particular kind of sadness that doesn't come from memory. It doesn't attach itself to a specific moment, a childhood scene, a lost relationship, or a clear mistake. Instead, it floats. A sense that somewhere, somehow, life was supposed to feel different. Softer, deeper, more complete. Not better in obvious ways, just more aligned. This feeling often appears without warning, during quiet evenings, while watching light fade through a window, while hearing music that seems to remember something the mind cannot. The emotion feels like nostalgia, but there is no image to return to, only atmosphere. It's not homesickness for a place, it's homesickness for a version of life that exists only as an impression. A life where time moved slower, where presence came naturally, where choices felt less fractured. A life that feels familiar despite never having been lived. This is why the feeling is difficult to explain. There is no story to tell, no event to point to, only a quiet ache that says, something meaningful was possible here, and somehow it slipped past. This longing doesn't accuse. It doesn't shout regret or demand change. It simply observes that life unfolded one way and not another, and that both versions feel real. Part of the ache comes from imagination, from glimpsing alternative paths without ever walking them. Not dramatic what-ifs, just subtle ones. Moments that could have lingered longer, decisions that could have been made with less urgency, relationships that could have been entered with more openness. Nothing tragic, just different. The mind is capable of sensing these parallel possibilities, not as plans, but as atmospheres. And sometimes, those atmospheres feel more emotionally real than the facts of what actually happened. This is not regret in the traditional sense. Regret wants correction. This feeling wants recognition. It doesn't ask to go back. It asks to be acknowledged. There is grief here, but not for loss, for absence, for something that was never fully formed yet somehow deeply felt. This kind of nostalgia often arises during stability, when life becomes predictable, when routines settle, when days no longer surprise themselves. That's when the contrast appears, not between past and present, but between what is and what quietly could have been. The imagined version of life often feels more emotionally coherent, not because it was easier, but because it feels undivided, less rushed, less interrupted, less negotiated. It holds together in a way real life rarely does. Real life fragments. Attention splits. Time compresses. Intentions compete. The imagined life doesn't have to deal with any of that. It exists without friction. That's part of its power, and part of the pain. This longing doesn't mean life has failed. It means awareness has expanded. It means the inner world has enough depth to sense unrealized dimensions. Some people never feel this, not because they are fulfilled, but because they never pause long enough to notice. This feeling requires stillness. It requires enough quiet to hear what isn't there. The version of life being missed often represents qualities, not events. A sense of belonging,
a feeling of meaning unfolding naturally, an ease with time. These are not guaranteed by circumstance. They are states. And states are fragile. It's possible to touch them briefly without sustaining them. A moment of connection, a fleeting sense of clarity, a day that felt whole. Then life continues, and the state dissolves. Later, the memory remains, but without context, detached from time, almost mythic. That's why it feels like missing something that never existed, because what's being missed isn't a chapter, it's a tone. This tone hovers over the present like a shadow of another life, not demanding replacement, just recognition. Trying to recreate it directly never works. The moment it's chased, it disappears, because it was never an object. It was alignment. Alignment between inner tempo and outer rhythm, between attention and time, between meaning and movement. When that alignment is absent, the longing grows louder, not to punish, but to remind. The reminder isn't cruel. It simply says, there are dimensions of experience that remain unexplored, not because of failure, but because life rarely allows everything at once. This longing doesn't require resolution. It doesn't need to be fixed or satisfied. It needs space. Enough space to exist without being translated into disappointment. Because sometimes, missing a life that never existed is simply evidence that something inside is still alive, still sensing, still imagining, still capable of depth. And the question that remains isn't how to return to that imagined life, but something quieter. What is this longing trying to keep from being forgotten?